let's break down James Harden's impact with the Philadelphia 76ers. I'm going to let you go first, Rob. You're up, man.
Well, I mean, listen, we have said I feel like since Joel Embiid came into this league, we need another star. We need another star. You thought maybe the guy that's now in Brooklyn was it. He wasn't. So it's put up or shut up time for this team. I mean, it really is. And I'm not saying game one, they got to come out and score 80 points between the two of them and just not. But as far as this season, next season, it's put up or shut up time, right? The process is done now. We've got the two stars. We got two top 10, 15 players in the league on the same roster. So what I'm really interested to see is how does Doc adjust the lineups? You got to stagger, right? Like you have to. And I feel like we've said that before and he hasn't. But I feel like that's the one thing that I'm really focused on looking for. And I know that everyone is saying, wow, the bench production isn't a big deal. No, it is. And I'm still a little leery that Furkan Korkmaz is getting big minutes. I'm very leery of that. I'm really hoping that something in the buyout market comes into play and that Cauley-Stein is not our only saving grace move on the 10-day contract.
All right, so Rob is looking at Doc's rotations. What are you looking at? Break down James Harden's impact. What do you expect, Austin?
Well, I mean, he is it's a bit of a clunky fit, but he also plugs in so many holes like this team has. Like he's only played 13 possessions against his own this year, but he scored, I think, 1.2 points per possession, which is like 83rd percentile in the NBA. So that's elite. His isolation scoring is 1.057 points per possession, and like across the board, he's good on spot ups, good on handoffs, good on isolation. His pick and roll has been more average this season, but I think that might be more of a function of not having like a consistent pick and roll partner. But I think across the board, he's an elite shot creator. He's one of the maybe the best isolation scorer in NBA history. And the Sixers went from having nobody that could create shots to having Tyrese Maxey and having the best shot creator of all time. So it's a pretty big change in terms of how your team is constructed. I'm very interested to see how this all plays out. I will say it's definitely been a longer week than most All-Star breaks are, because I am just very intrigued by how this whole situation is going to work and who's going to do what.
Absolutely. Quentin says, will we see new plays, or will we see classic Doc stand around, raise his arms up, yell at everything, but not do anything at the same time? Probably not, but we'll see. What about you, Mark? What are your expectations for James Harden's impact?
Well, expectations I'll get into, but the first thing that comes into my brain is you watch that video that everyone watched when he first got here and he first started practicing with the team with Harden and Maxey, shooting, off the dribble threes, doing crazy dribble moves into those threes. And it's like, for how long did the Philadelphia 76ers go without one guy who could do that? And now having two guys who can do that you're able to stagger. It's dumbfounding how much more dribbling and how much more passing ability James Harden adds to a team that we got lucky and lucked into Tyrese Maxey a little bit in terms of him being a 21st pick and being a piece that we now feel like is the third piece, probably. I mean, we can debate whether it's him or Tobias, I guess, but I think James Harden helps literally everyone in the Sixers lineup besides, maybe Joel Embiid. He's going to help Joel Embiid be a better player. He's going to help Joel Embiid, be a more likely, and not MVP, but a more likely championship player. You might hurt his MVP chances is actually what I meant to say there. But when you look at Matisse Thybulle, I think having his, impact defensively out there is going to be huge next to James Harden, and the negatives that he brings on offense, those tweets going around like the Maxey, Curry, Matisse, Tobias, Joel lineup is like a -13 net. Those things are less of an issue when you plug in James Harden's shot creation for Seth Curry. I mean, that is a huge difference that you really can't make a big enough deal of. And I love Seth Curry. And I mentioned we haven't had guys who can do what Harden and Maxey can do in forever before they both got here. I mean, we had like the Seth Curry Joel 2-man game. We had the JJ Redick Joel 2-man game, and we thought that was like innovative offensive basketball. And now you have James Harden, who everyone out there outside of Philly, it turned into, all 9 months that we held on to Ben Simmons. People were yelling at people like Krell when he wrote articles praising Daryl and how he was handling it, saying, oh, they should take Harrison Barnes, or they should take OG Anunoby. They should take all of these mid-level guys. But then when we trade for James Harden, all of a sudden it's a win of a trade for the Nets, and all of a sudden we got bad value. It's an absurd conversation. It's just something that people want to throw out there now that Ben's on a good team with Kevin Durant, and they want to root for that team with Kevin Durant. But everyone that's using that argument is saying, oh, James Harden's washed. James Harden isn't the same player he was a couple of years ago. If we're saying 23, 10, and 8 on close to the league lead in assists is washed, I'll take a washed James Harden every single day. I mean, this is a guy last year, even if you want to go to last year, he was averaging 25, 11, and 8. I mean, this is an all-time player. 3 years ago, I did. Sorry, I'm not going to talk too much. I'll shut up after this. But 3 years ago on my podcast, before I was on the Painted Lines, I did a top 40 post-ABA merger of all time. I had James Harden 23rd. So that's post-1970s. I forgot the exact year, but post mid-1970s, I had him as the 23rd best player of all time since then, and that's 3 years ago. So, I mean, this is a top 25 player of all time in terms of modern history.
Mark touched on something. I want to ask the people, because it's typically the same people are saying that the Sixers should get whatever they want, are now the people saying that the Nets won the trade. So the question to them, right, the Harrison Barnes, Buddy Hield trade people, is who would you rather have, Harrison Barnes and Buddy Hield or James Harden? I don't think everything.
The problem is you'd rather have Harrison Barnes, Buddy Hield.
Well, then they don't know shit. It's just stupid. Like, I mean, come on. It's like everyone, they're not going to get a top player. Then they get a top player, and it's not the good top player that they wanted. I'm flabbergasted by some fans that just can't get out of their own way with stupidity.
Yeah, for me, my first thought with James Harden, there's a lot of ways James Harden fits with the Sixers, but for me, it's clutch scoring. It's absolutely clutch scoring. When you look at, that second, the semifinals of the playoffs last year against the Atlanta Hawks, you know what the team net was in that series? A negative 31.1. During clutch situations. You look at
how could we forget that? Wow.
Yeah. James Harden, man, the Sixers finally got a closer, especially from the perimeter. They finally got a guy who isn't afraid to dunk a basketball with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, in the second round of a playoff game, game 7, just saying. But you look at the Sixers this season, 106.3 offensive rating in clutch situations this year. While like James Harden has an off year, the dude is a 13.3 net in clutch situations. Having someone not named Joel Embiid that can get the ball in the basket is probably going to even help Joel Embiid this much defensively as well. Having a guy take that offensive load off of him is going to have a trickle-down effect on not just Joel Embiid, but for the rest of this roster. For me, I go to clutch situations. Before we move on to the next point, does anybody have any final thoughts about James Harden's impact?
It's kind of weird that the Sixers just are finding out now that it's legal to have multiple guys who can dribble.
What dribble? What is that? What does that mean?
Tyrese Maxey is enrolled into James Harden University, and he's taking honors classes.
It's like some janitor in the practice facility was cleaning out a closet and found a rule book. Was like, oh, we can have more of these guys. Wow, I never knew that. Someone should tell them that. Guys, look what I found. There's a rule in the rule book that says they can have multiple guys who can dribble and shoot and maybe even pass the ball while they dribble or in the same motion. How incredible is that? And then they're like, whoa, shit, we can do more things now.
And while I respect Seth Curry so much, I'm somewhat glad to kind of see him move on. Doc won't have to rely on that Joel Seth Curry two-man game. Maybe we'll get Tyrese Maxey minutes on that second unit for once. Does anybody think that is going to happen here? Because the Sixers bench is among the last in the league in scored.
I would.
Yeah.
I wouldn't start Tyrese. I would.
I'm with Austin.
I'm with you there. I'm with you.
I'm with Austin. I don't know if he's going to do that, but I do believe with this team the way it is that either Tyrese, James, or Joel have to be on the court at all times. And I know he's going to do it. Listen. I'm already preparing myself for Friday to see the all bench lineup and not have one of those three guys out there and just want to smack myself in the face over it. But to me, they're the three guys because I know that he'll say, well, I'm going to put Tobias out there, but they're the three guys I'm looking at right now. And I know it's a lot to put on a kid like Tyrese Maxey, but listen, you traded Seth Curry. Like you just said, Dives, this to me screams more Maxey minutes. And, I want to see what Maxey, Harden, and B can do together at times, most of the end of the game. But, one of those guys has to be on the floor at all times. You got to stagger it.
Time is now, Doc. We're watching you, man. Time is now. Quentin says Brick Curry was good but too small. And
Whoa. Brick Curry. Really?
Yeah.
Really?
He literally had one bad month. Come on.
We forget that he was maybe outside of Joel, the best player against Atlanta last year and carried the team early in the season when they couldn't score. Come on, people. See, I just get mad at people.
All right,
I have a question for you guys.
I don't listen to the fans. I keep it strictly to who I follow and who follows me. And if I have first year people chiming in, I just block them out.
Would you guys have rather traded Matisse or Seth Curry in that trade?
I think
I was hoping for Seth.
I think Seth is a casualty that you must have.
I would have done
Matisse, by the way, for what it's worth. If it was,
no. I'm with Mark. I was on the Matisse. I was on the trade Matisse bandwagon, and I think just because I understood. But the more I looked at it, you add Matisse and Ben's defense to that team, it really is going to limit you in a playoff series. But I don't know. I just fell in love with the idea of the Seth Curry shooter with all the spacing that having these two guys could create. But sure. I understand what Austin says is exactly right. I think Seth was the guy that had to fall on the sword for this one to really go down. So you could at least have the defense of Matisse. But my God, if I see another 0 for 6 game from 3, it's like cringeworthy sometimes when he shoots right now. I feel so bad.
We'll always have the NBA draft night when the Sixers in the second round traded for Seth Curry, and we were all celebrating and having drinks. Never forget that. That was so much fun.
For the record, I on my stance on it was get Harden no matter the cost. I was willing to do whatever it took to get that done. But I think there's arguments on both sides of whether or not they should have kept Seth or whether or not they should have kept Matisse. Or, Brooklyn might have wanted Seth instead of Matisse. We have no idea how those conversations went, I guess. But I do think that's just an interesting thought experiment.
My favorite was people failing to realize that Seth Curry is only under contract for, I think, the same amount of time that Harden is under contract if Harden opts in, so another season. And he was making $8 million. You realistically were not going to extend him because he was going to ask for probably more than $8 million. So were you really not going to make a trade because of Seth Curry, who then you were going to let walk into it in a year and a half anyway? Let's be a little bit real here and not be so insane. I'm glad.
I totally agree.
I'm glad that fans from Fishtown don't run the team.
All right, let's roll on.
Sorry to anybody from Fishtown, although I'm not that sorry.
Ricochet shot at Fishtown there. Jeez. Yeah.